The diplomatic shuttle's emergency beacon cut through the howling winds of Kithar 7. Like a dying scream before falling silent, Lieutenant Jace Morgan pressed his gloved hand against the frosted view port, watching the last wisps of smoke dissipate from their crashed vessel into the purple-tinged atmosphere of the frozen moon. "Well," said his partner, Kurilla, her melodic voice carrying that distinctive purring undertone of the Thalari species. "That could have gone better." Jace turned to study her pale purple features, barely visible in the dim emergency lighting of the abandoned research station they'd managed to reach. Her dark curls were dusted with ice crystals, and her large, expressive eyes reflected the amber glow of their single-functioning light stick. Despite their dire circumstances, she seemed remarkably calm. The Kitharan Council isn't exactly known for their warm welcomes, Jace replied, shouldering his pack. "But shooting down a diplomatic vessel seems excessive, even for them." Kurilla's tail, thick and furred like the rest of her, swished behind her as she explored their temporary shelter. "Perhaps they mistook our intentions, or perhaps they simply don't want the trade agreements we came to negotiate." She paused at a bank of dead control panels. "No matter, we're alive, and that's what counts." The research station was a relic from the first colonial surveys, built into the mountainside for protection against Kithar 7's brutal weather. Its corridors were narrow and functional, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Most of the equipment had been stripped away years ago, leaving only the bare bones of what had once been a thriving outpost. Jace's breath formed small clouds as he spoke, the temperatures dropping fast. "We need to find whatever heating systems are still functional." "Already checked," Kurilla said, her ears twitching. A gesture he'd learned indicated mild amusement. "The main power grid is completely dead. There's an emergency cell in the communications room, but it's barely keeping the minimal life support running." They made their way deeper into the station, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. The walls were covered in a thin layer of frost, and their breath came in increasingly visible puffs. Jace's military training kicked in as he assessed their situation: no working communication array, limited power, and outside temperatures that would kill them within minutes. "Here," Kurilla called from a small chamber off the main corridor. This was someone's quarters. Jace joined her in the cramped space. A single emergency cot was bolted to one wall, its thin mattress covered by a regulation thermal blanket. A small locker stood open and empty beside it. The room's porthole showed nothing but swirling snow and darkness. "One bed," Jace observed, stating the obvious. "Indeed." Kurilla tilted her head, studying him with those large, intelligent eyes. "Is this going to be problematic for humans? I've read your species has complex social structures around sleeping arrangements." Heat rose in Jace's cheeks despite the cold. "It's not. I mean, we can figure something out. I can take the floor." "The floor." Kurilla's tail twitched, and she made a soft sound that might have been laughter. "Jace, the ambient temperature is dropping below what either of our species can survive. Sleeping on that metal floor would be suicide." She had a point. Already, he could feel the cold seeping through his thermal suit, and they'd been inside for less than an hour. The night would be long, and their body heat might be the only thing standing between them and hypothermia. Shared warmth is simply practical, Kurilla continued, settling onto the cot and patting the space beside her. "Among my people, it's a survival instinct." Jace hesitated at the threshold, his human sensibilities warring with the reality of their situation. "I should really take the floor," Jace insisted, even as his teeth began to chatter. "It wouldn't be appropriate." "Appropriate?" Kurilla's ears flattened slightly against her head, a sign of confusion he'd learned to recognize during their months of partnership. "Jace, we're facing potential hypothermia. Your human social conventions seem poorly adapted for survival situations." She was right. Of course, the temperature gauge on his suit's display showed it was already 20 degrees below what humans could safely endure for extended periods. The thin walls of the research station provided minimal insulation against Kithar 7's brutal night cycle. "Among the Thalari," Kurilla continued, gracefully arranging herself on the narrow cot, "sharing body heat is as natural as sharing food or water. It's a matter of practical survival. Not, she paused, seeming to search for the right word. Not whatever complex meanings your species assigns to physical proximity. Jace watched as she efficiently arranged the thermal blanket, her movements fluid and purposeful. Her tail curled and uncurled behind her, a gesture he'd noticed she made when thinking. Despite her alien features, there was something undeniably attractive about her confidence, her complete lack of self-consciousness about their situation. It's not that simple for humans, he said, still hovering uncertainly at the edge of the cot. Physical closeness, it implies things, relationships, intimacy. Kurilla looked up at him, her large eyes reflecting the amber light. And what if it does? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither had dared to voice during their professional partnership. Jace felt his heart rate increase, and not just from the cold. Kurilla, lie down, Jace, she said softly. Before we both freeze to death. Reluctantly, he settled onto the cot beside her, immediately struck by how small the space felt with both of them on it. The mattress dipped under their combined weight, naturally rolling them toward the center. Kurilla pulled the thermal blanket over them both, and suddenly he was acutely aware of her warmth. Her scent, something like cinnamon and starlight, that was uniquely Thalari. Better, she asked, though she had to know the answer, even through their thermal suits. He could feel the heat radiating from her body. Much, he admitted. They lay side by side, staring up at the darkened ceiling. Jace tried to maintain some distance, but the narrow cot made it nearly impossible. Every time he shifted to give her more room, the cold air would slip under the blanket, forcing him back toward her warmth. You're very tense, Kurilla observed after several minutes. I'm trying to be respectful. Respect, she mused, another interesting human concept. Among my people, respect is shown through trust, through allowing vulnerability, without warning. Her tail snaked around his leg, the soft fur providing an additional barrier against the cold. Like this, Jace went rigid. The gesture felt impossibly intimate, more personal than any physical contact they'd shared in months of working together. Her tail was warm and strong, wrapping around his calf with gentle but definitive possession. Is this normal for your species? He managed to ask. Kryla shifted closer, and he could feel her breath against his shoulder. What's normal, Jace? We're the beings, alone on a frozen moon, depending on each other for survival. Perhaps normal is whatever keeps us alive. Her pragmatism was both frustrating and oddly comforting. She made it sound so simple, so logical. But logic couldn't explain the way his pulse quickened when she moved against him, or the way her tail's gentle grip seemed to anchor him to something deeper than mere survival. Get some rest, she murmured, settling her head against his shoulder. Tomorrow we'll need to signal for rescue. Hours passed, but neither of them slept. The storm outside intensified, rattling the station's walls with each powerful gust. In the darkness, their breathing had synchronized, a rhythm as natural as the tide. Jace, Kurilla's voice was softened. The darkness, yeah. Are you uncomfortable? I can feel your heart racing. He was acutely aware of how closely they were pressed together, how her head fit perfectly in the hollow of his shoulder, how her tail had gradually tightened around his leg throughout the night. Not uncomfortable, he said carefully, just aware. Aware of what? Of you. The admission slipped out before he could stop it. He felt rather than saw her smile. Good, awareness is the beginning of trust. Is that a Thalari saying? It's something my grandmother taught me. She was a diplomat like us. She used to say that you can't truly understand another being until you've shared vulnerability with them. Kurilla shifted slightly, her hand coming to rest on his chest. Warmth, darkness, the unknown. Her palm was warm even through his thermal suit, and he could feel his heartbeat against her touch. What else did she teach you? Many things. The importance of reading body language, understanding the spaces between words. Her fingers traced a small circle over his heart. She taught me that some connections transcend species, transcend the boundaries we think are fixed. Did she ever? Jace hesitated. Did she ever form connections with non-Thalari? She bonded with a human, actually, my grandfather. Kurilla's tail squeezed gently around his leg. It was considered unusual at the time, but they made it work. 47 years together before he passed. I didn't know interspecies relationships were possible. Possible, yes. Easy, no. She was quiet for a moment. What about you, Jace? Have you ever felt connected to someone different? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Outside, the wind howled with renewed fury, but inside their small pocket of warmth, the world felt intimate and contained. "I've felt something," he admitted. "These past months, working with you, it's been different than any partnership I've had before. Different how easier, natural, like we understand each other without having to explain everything." He paused. "I look forward to seeing you. Each morning, I worry when you're in danger. I find myself watching you when I think you're not looking." Krilla lifted her head to look at him, her eyes catching the faint light filtering through the porthole. "I know you watch me. I watch you too, you do. The way you furrow your brow when you're concentrating. How you always check on everyone else's safety before your own. The kindness in your voice when you speak to junior officers." Her hand moved from his chest to trace the line of his jaw. "You have a good face, Jace Morgan. Strong and honest." Her touch sent electricity through him. "Krilla, among my people, when we wrap our tails around someone, it's not casual. It's an invitation, a declaration of trust." And she seemed to search for the right word, affection. "And you wrapped yours around me." "I did." "Why?" She moved closer, her face inches from his. "Because despite your human social conventions, despite the complexity of our situation, I trust you. And more than that, I want to trust you." Her breath was warm against his skin, and he could see the subtle patterns in her purple-tinted features, beautiful in their alienness. "What does that mean for us?" "It means we have a choice to make." Her tail tightened around his leg, possessive and warm. "We can pretend this is only about survival, about staying warm through a cold night. Or we can acknowledge what's really happening between us, and what's really happening." Krilla's hand slipped to the back of his neck, her fingers threading through his hair. "I think you know." The space between them seemed to disappear, magnetic and inevitable. Her skin was warm silk under his palm as he reached up to cup her face, thumb tracing the delicate curve of her cheekbone. Jace woke to the soft sound of Krilla's breathing and the gradual lightening of the porthole. Sometime during the night, they had shifted even closer together. Her head was nestled against his neck, one arm draped across his chest, her tail still wrapped securely around his leg. His own arm was curved around her shoulders, holding her against him. For a moment, he simply lay there, absorbing the reality of their position. Every point where their bodies touched seemed to hum with significance. Her purple skin was beautiful in the morning light, and he found himself memorizing the delicate patterns that ran along her collarbone, barely visible through the opening of her thermal suit. "Good morning," she murmured without opening her eyes, her voice still thick with sleep. "How did you know I was awake?" "Your breathing changed." She lifted her head to look at him, and he saw something new in her eyes, a softness, a vulnerability that hadn't been there before. "Did you sleep at all?" "Some. You?" "A little." She made no move to untangle herself from him. The storm's passing. They could hear it. The wind had diminished to a whisper, and faint sunlight filtered through the porthole. Soon, the rescue teams would be able to reach them. Soon, they would have to return to their separate lives, their professional relationship, the careful boundaries they had maintained for months. "Jace," Krilla said softly. Last night, the sharp whine of approaching engines cut through the morning quiet. They both went still, listening to the sound grow closer. A rescue shuttle, right on schedule. "They found us," Jace said, though he made no move to get up. "They found us," Krilla agreed, her tail tightening reflexively around his leg. The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity. The rescue team to humans and a Thalari medic bustled into the station with equipment and questions. Jace and Krilla were separated for medical evaluation, their vital signs checked, their story recorded for the official report. "Minor hypothermia," the medic announced. "Nothing serious. You two did well to keep each other warm." If only they knew, Jace thought, catching Krilla's eye across the small medical bay of the rescue shuttle. She gave him a look that was part amusement, part promise, as if to say, "They have no idea what really happened." The flight back to the diplomatic station took 2 hours. Jace found himself stealing glances at Krilla. noting the way she moved differently now, more aware of him. When their hands accidentally brushed as they reached for the same data pad, the contact sent a jolt through him that had nothing to do with static electricity. The Kitharan Council has agreed to a formal apology, the rescue team leader informed them. Apparently, your crash wasn't intentional. A malfunction in their defense grid misidentified your shuttle as hostile. How convenient, Krilla said dryly. Back at the station, they were whisked away to separate debriefing sessions. Jace found himself sitting across from Commander Phillips, trying to explain the diplomatic mission's failure without revealing how completely the night had changed his perspective on everything. And Agent Krilla, Phillips asked, how did she handle the situation? Professionally, Jace said. She probably saved both our lives with her knowledge of cold weather survival. Good to hear. Interspecies partnerships can be challenging, but you just seem to work well together. If only you knew, Jace thought again. When the debriefing finally ended, Jace found Krilla waiting for him in the corridor outside the briefing rooms. She was leaning against the wall, her arms crossed, her tail swishing slowly behind her. Walk with me, she asked. They made their way to the observation deck, a quiet space overlooking the diplomatic station's landing bays. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that complemented Krilla's skin tone perfectly. So, she said, settling onto one of the benches, what happens now? Jace sat beside her, careful to maintain a proper distance. I don't know. We go back to our regular assignments, I suppose. File our reports. Pretend last night was just about survival. Is that what you want? No, he said immediately, but I don't know what the alternative is. Krilla studied him for a long moment. Jace, I need to tell you something. The tail wrapping. It's not just about trust or warmth. Among my people, it's a bonding gesture. It means commitment, partnership, the beginning of something permanent. The revelation hung between them like a bridge, one that would either connect them permanently or burn away everything they had built. Jace stared at Krilla, processing the magnitude of what she had just told him. A bonding gesture, he repeated. Slowly, permanent partnership. Yes, her tail curved around to rest beside her, and he noticed how she kept it carefully away from him now, as if giving him space to decide. I understand if this complicates things for you. Human relationships don't work the same way. No, they don't, Jace agreed. But maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. Hope flickered in her eyes. What do you mean? I mean that human relationships are complicated because we overthink everything. We create barriers and rules and social expectations that often get in the way of genuine connection. He shifted closer to her on the bench. But last night, none of that mattered. It was just us, two beings taking care of each other. And it felt right, Krilla said softly. It felt right, he confirmed. More right than anything I've experienced before. The observation deck was quiet around them, the distant hum of the station's operations providing a gentle backdrop to their conversation. Through the transparent walls, stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Distant suns that bore witness to their decision. There will be challenges, Krilla warned. Interspecies relationships require approvals from both our governments. There will be medical considerations, cultural adjustments, people who won't understand, and bureaucracy, Jace added with a wry smile. Lots of bureaucracy, especially bureaucracy. But your grandparents made it work. They did. 47 years together, like I said. Krilla's expression grew thoughtful. My grandmother used to say that love wasn't about finding someone from your own world. It was about finding someone willing to build a new world with you. Jace reached out, taking her hand in his. Her fingers were longer than a human's, more delicate, but they fit perfectly with his. What kind of world would we build? One where diplomatic missions don't end in crashes, she said, making him laugh. One where sharing warmth is about more than just survival. One where trust and affection aren't bound by species or convention. It sounds like a good world. It would be our world. Jace lifted their joined hands, studying the contrast between his pale skin and her purple tones. Different, but complementary. Krilla, when you wrapped your tail around my leg last night, yes, I want you to know that if I had understood what it meant, I would have welcomed it even more than I did. He met her eyes. "I'm welcoming it now, if the offer still stands." The smile that spread across her features was radiant. "Are you sure? There's no taking it back once a bond is acknowledged." "I'm sure." He stood, pulling her up with him. "I'm sure because I've spent months pretending I didn't feel what I felt. I'm sure because last night, when you trusted me enough to share that kind of intimacy, I realized I've never trusted anyone the way I trust you. And I'm sure because when I imagine my future, you're in it." Kurilla stepped closer, her free hand coming up to rest on his chest. "Then let me ask you properly. Jace Morgan, will you accept my bond? Will you build a new world with me?" "Yes," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes, to all of it, this time." When her tail wrapped around his leg, he understood its significance completely. It was a promise, a declaration, a commitment that transcended species and convention. And when she rose up on her toes to kiss him, he knew they were sealing something that had been building between them for months. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as they learned the feel of each other's lips, but it deepened quickly, months of suppressed attraction and denied connection flowing between them. She tasted like starlight and promises, and he never wanted to let her go. When they finally broke apart, breathless and smiling, Kurilla rested her forehead against his. "So," she said, her tail still securely wrapped around his leg, "what's our first act as bonded partners? Request a transfer to long-term partnership status." Jay said immediately. "File the interspecies relationship paperwork. Probably suffer through a lot of meetings with very serious bureaucrats." "Romantic," she teased. "Oh, I can be romantic too." He pulled her closer. "But first, I want to take you to my quarters and spend the next several hours showing you exactly how much last night meant to me." Her ears perked up with interest. "Now that," she said, her voice dropping to a purr, "sounds like an excellent beginning." Hand in hand, tail wrapped possessively around his leg, they walked back into the station together. Behind them, through the observation deck's windows, the stars shone down on a universe suddenly full of infinite possibilities.